going to go ahead and get started. If you're here from Intro to Social Work, please make sure that you sign in and get credit for being here. If you're here for another class, you will have to talk to maybe Prof. Wallace about a sign-in sheet for that class. So welcome to our annual alumni panel. I'm not sure how many years we've been doing this, but several anyhow. It's always a great opportunity for current students to hear reflections and insight from alumni. So today I'm going to introduce the panel, then I'm going to let them give a self-introduction, a little bit about their positions and their roles in their current organizations. And then the questions I'll be posing are the ones that social work, or Intro to Social Work and Social Work Practice with Individuals created. So it's a variety of questions that you guys actually wanted to pose to the panelists this year. So this is Bridget Britton, and she is a graduate of our traditional program. And I think you said 2010. This is Zach Edwards. He's also a graduate of the traditional program in 2017. I didn't know before he just told me. This is Travis Porter. He is a graduate of the Social Work GPS program. And you just graduated this past spring, correct? And this is Lori Jones. Now let me have mercy on Lori Jones today, because we had invited Jackie Pack, who's an alumni of our traditional social work program, and Jackie is currently with a client and was not able to come to the panel. So Lori graciously came over to tell us, because we weren't answering the phones, and I said, well, wouldn't you like to be on the panel? And she's like, sure. So Lori is a graduate of MVNU, just not of the social work program. So we are glad that she was willing to punt. That is a good role modeling of what it's like to be a social worker, or someone who's flexible and just willing to jump right in. So I will start maybe with Bridget and let you introduce yourself, share a little bit about your current position and what your role is.
Okay, so it's funny that I have to start off because my position is very complicated. So we often try to talk about how to describe what we do. If you guys are familiar with Ohio State University Extension, shake your head yes if you're familiar with that. No, shake your head yes if you're familiar with 4-H. Okay, so I work in the same office as 4-H, but I actually, the basics of what I do is I teach community classes to adults and youth and seniors. It's a very wide variety. And my technical title is a family consumer science educator, and not every county has one of me. There's about 55 counties that have an FCS educator, but the very unique and amazing thing about my job is I get to basically pick what I want to teach. So Ohio State Extension has some signature programs that they promote, such as things like successful co-parenting with divorced parents or separating parents. We do traditional canning, freezing, preserving classes for cooking. I personally do not very many of those kind of classes, sewing, but now there's this really great big push in the Extension initiative for mental health awareness, and I teach a lot of mental health first aid, if you've heard of that. I teach a lot of the Generation RX, which is prescription drug misuse to youth. I teach bullying prevention. Basically, community members come to me and say, I really want a lesson about this. I teach a senior citizen fall prevention class, and we figured out and we make it work. The majority of my curriculums are evidence-based, approved by either the Ohio State University or like a trauma-informed care curriculum. But some of them, Ohio State encourages us to develop our own curriculum, so some of them are in the works for myself. So it's a super great job. I get to do whatever I want, and I love it. But it's confusing.
Well, my name is Zach. I work as a licensed social worker, and I'm specifically an inpatient therapist at a mental health hospital at Columbus Springs East. So a lot of times at our hospital, we're doing a lot of crisis interventions. A lot of patients will come in. Average length of stay for like 5 to 10 days. We'll be there 24/7. So a lot of times patients who are either at risk of harm to themselves or maybe to others, whether they're suicidal or active psychosis, not able to function in the community. We have nursing staff, social workers, and psychiatrists ensuring that patients get stabilized before their discharge. So the therapist role, we do everything from facilitating psychotherapy groups, reaching out to family and support systems, like case managers in the community. We may relink patients with new community resources, or for those who may come in with no community resources whatsoever, link them with whether it's like an outpatient program, community therapists, psychiatrists in the community, so they receive ongoing support. So that's just a little bit about what I do. We serve anyone from those with personality disorders, mood disorders. We've had some new programming for rehab, substance use programming, and also have a program for those who are active veterans, active military members that we probably started like about 5 months ago. So even though it's pretty short term for patients that are there, there's a lot of variety in what we do. So.
All right. My name is Travis Porter. I recently graduated from the GPS program. I'm a guy that I wear a lot of hats. I have a lot of jobs. My 40-hour-a-week job is at CareSource. I'm part of the case management team there. A lot of you guys probably heard of CareSource. It's the low income, no income insurance. There's 5 major insurances. We're the best. But we're an insurance company. On that case management team, I'm there to address member psychosocial needs, meaning trying to address those things that keep sending them, that they can't take care of, that they may be able to address to keep them out of the hospitals, which costs the insurance company more money. So if I can get them to not go to the hospital as much, it kind of keeps more money in the insurance company's pockets. So I'm going to go into the mental hospitals. I kind of specialize in going to the mental hospitals such as Quantum Springs, River Vista, Sun, all those. I got all Franklin County area hospitals right now. I go in and see those members and try to address some of the things that's happening in their lives. See if we can get them on their feet. A lot of times they're homeless, using those places as housing and things like that. So we can try to get them the resources they need to get housing and get food and get those things addressed so they can stay out of those facilities. That's my 40-hour-a-week job. I also work a part-time job at the Village Network, where I work in a court diversion program. I work with the youth that have felonies right now. So it's kind of the tougher group. It's called evening reporting. Those guys come there every day, 5 days a week. If they don't come, it's a parole violation. We notify their POs and they get picked up or you get a warrant. But we provide social skills training, just trying to teach them different ways. We call it the groups thinking for change. We try to teach them different thinking skills, how to use active listening, all those type of things, show them a different way, role modeling all those behaviors and things like that. And then I recently started, since right before graduation, me and my family started a company, which is our family passion. It's called Ohio Gap Closers, where we focus on servicing foster care youth. And in that job, what do we do is try to touch the lives of those that touch foster kids. We provide 7 different trainings to improve the academic outcomes of youth in foster care. Not only youth in foster care, we can service any kid, but that's our passion. That's what we try to focus on. We've already worked with different schools and universities trying to help that foster care population improve their outcomes in all facets of life. So that's kind of some of the things I do.
I'm going to say it. We worked together 20 years ago at Rosemont, what's it called?
Rosemont Center.
Rosemont Center, yes. And it was a residential treatment facility. And I actually saw him last year at like the career thing that they had here in February.
Reunited.
I was like, do you remember me? Like, stories, days. And then I walked in here and I was like, oh, familiar face. So you just never know where life may take you. And back on the panel that you weren't planning on Friday. Just saying. So I've actually I graduated with a degree in sociology from here. And I worked in the social service field for more than 20 years. And I spent 15 years working with Knox County Head Start and was like an associate director, but supervised the centers directly, which has a lot of social work components to it. And I'm currently the executive director for New Directions, which is the domestic abuse shelter and rape crisis center of Knox County. I've been the director about 18 months. I started prior to that in prevention programming. And as part of that prevention programming, going into the schools, doing a lot of things with high school students. I actually spent today with 120 high school students from Knox County doing a youth leadership day. So there's parts of my job that I didn't really want to give up. So working with youth is one of them. But doing the work that we do as a director, you get to do all the things like grant writing and reporting and all of that, those parts of it. But I still have a lot of day-to-day operational type things. Like I can tell you right now in our shelter, we have a mom and 2 children and 2 adult women that are there, and probably another one coming in because that's where Jackie is at the prosecutor's office waiting on a report to be filed for someone who needs to not go home. But I'll just share one thing that our agency is doing that's a little bit different that in Knox County has been a long time coming. The relationship with the law enforcement has been super compromised is the nicest word I can think of. So we have implemented what's called the lethality assessment program in our organization, and what that does is it puts us in contact, law enforcement contacts us directly from the scene of a domestic violence situation that's an intimate partner call. So we are actually, no matter what time of day it is, we actually get the call from law enforcement. They put the victim on the phone with us, and we're able to safety plan with that victim right in the moment. And I will say that in the first 7 months of programming, we had 90 phone calls, 90 what we call lap calls, and 70% of those were people that we would have never been in contact with otherwise. So we're doing a lot of kind of, cutting edge. I don't know if that's a thing in the domestic abuse world, but we're doing a lot of things to help victims in our part of the world. So that's just, I like to talk a little bit about that specifically as something new that we're doing in our agency, because definitely not all counties do the LAP program, but it is something that for us around here, it's brand new. Started February 1st, so we're not even a year into it yet.
All right, so we're going to jump right into the first question. How long did it take you to find a job and get hired after graduating with your BSW? Anyone? And Lori, if there's something you're like, you can pass.
After getting a degree.
Come up with something.
Well, I graduated in 2010, and in May of 2010, and my husband and I moved. We got married in June and moved to Indiana in June for him to pursue his master's degree, and I graduated with a bachelor's in social work. And I got my first social work job in probably September or August of that year of 2010. So just a couple months, factoring in, the month of May, we were moving. June, we were moving. We went on our honeymoon, moved, came back. But I will say, I don't know if it's, with me, if it's luck or there's just a really big demand for all social work jobs, but the amount of applications I fill out and job interviews I get requested for is like tenfold from what my husband gets. I mean, part of it is the field, but I'll fill out like 10 applications and get 9 interview calls back for. So I got my job very quickly. I applied for 3 jobs, got 3 interviews, and got 3 acceptances, and I picked one. It was a adult case management position in Indiana. So I got to hang out with some adults that live in the community predominantly, and just focus on daily living skills with them. So I took them to the store, took them shopping, laughed with them, helped them wash their clothes, basically tried to keep them out of inpatient care. Took them to the psychiatrist, things like that. So I got my job very quickly.
Yeah, I'd say I got my job very quickly as well. Mine was a little bit different because right when I graduated with my bachelor's in social work, I went straight into my master's in social work, which we'll get into a little bit later. I did the accelerated program in that program, so I did that in a year. And right after completing that, I think I graduated like the end of April. It was probably like a week, I think at the most later, that I had started my first job at Columbus Springs East. and got that connection through a job fair that Ohio State had put on specifically for social work students. So I had a few opportunities, networking opportunities with other potential employers, and after connecting with Columbus Springs East, after doing the interview and getting that, I think it wasn't even a week until I got an offer and a follow-up. So I think no matter if you're in Columbus or what area, I think there's a lot of availability, there's a lot of opportunities no matter what field or what your interest is in social work. And so even if you, whether it's your bachelor's or even your master's, I haven't had any problems with getting job opportunities and follow-ups and things like that. So yeah, it wasn't even a week after I graduated until I had started my first position.
So I'm the non-traditional route person. So as Lori mentioned, I've been in the social work field for 25 years probably, around that. I had my first social work job at Rosemont Center. So I actually had a job before I graduated recently. I was in school in Columbus at Ohio Dominican and got a job before I left that school and didn't complete that schooling at that time. So I started working at Rosemont at that time. Worked there for 10 years. Became a case manager at Dublin Counseling Center for another 10 years, and left that and went to CareSource, where I'm at currently. So I've been working at CareSource for, it'll be 3 years in January. So I was already in the field, already working. Once I graduated and things, it just got me some different promotions and positions. But I've been in the field active for years.
Mine, actually, I graduated in May and started at Rosemont in August. So it didn't take long. I always worked though, so I always I could give you a whole list of jobs I had that were not related to this field. But then after that, I've stayed in the social service field for about 25 years almost.
Did you go to graduate school? If so, why? If not, why not?
I did go to graduate school. After my husband finished his 2-year degree in Indiana, I did also the accelerated program in California. We wanted to move. I wanted to go somewhere fun. My husband said I could pick where I wanted to go, so I picked there, and there we went. No money, no kids, no nothing. We moved back here. She did not fly me in just for this event. I wish she did. But I did. I went to the accelerated program. I basically went because I didn't want to be a case manager my whole life. My personal feelings on social work are if you want to advance in a career above a case management kind of basic social services, job and family services kind of area, you almost have to have a master's degree. That's just what I've experienced applying for different jobs. So I did go get my master's after the 2-year break and did the accelerated program, and it was definitely worth it.
And so I said earlier, I got my master's in social work at Ohio State University. Graduated from Mount Vernon in 2017, and then started right after in the accelerated program. That program, it's a little bit faster paced, so doing it full time, it's about 3 semesters. So I did a summer, a fall, and a spring semester. And started, I think I had kind of like a month break in between school before I started my master's. I knew, for me, kind of similar to Bridget, I know I wanted to go into more kind of, have more one therapeutic experience. I wanted to kind of increase my knowledge base from what I got out of the MVNU Social Work program. And I knew I was open, I was still figuring out exactly what that looked like, but I knew I wanted to kind of do a more therapeutic job, whether that was individual therapy, maybe it was like in a medical social work setting. So I knew for me, I at some point wanted to get my master's in social work, and I felt like for me, my best opportunity was just to do it right after, so I can kind of transition right in and not wait. I know for everyone it looks a little bit different depending on what everyone's interests are and what that looks like. But, for me, it was the best opportunity to just transition in. Had a really good experience out of doing that.
Probably just to share real quick, when we talk about the accelerated program, I think that most programs that are the 2-year master's school, what I found out was the first year would be the top level of your classes that you take in your 4-year degree. So that's why you really don't want to go in, like if you have a bachelor's and you want to go get your master's, I don't think we both would recommend doing the 2-year degree, because it would still be full-time, and you would still be learning all the same stuff.
Right.
That you've already learned.
Yeah, there's a lot of classes that you guys are already taking right now that if you were to wait a certain amount of time, if you took just a 2-year full-time in social work, you'd kind of retake some of those classes. So you're kind of saving time and money if you feel like the accelerated program is for you. You already have the background in social work, and it's a really good opportunity and a quick way to get it all finished.
I'm gonna let Laura answer, I'm gonna go last.
We're switching it up. I do have a master's degree in marriage and family counseling, and I waited a long time, and it was more because I felt like I needed it to be able to advance in the field. Now as an executive director, I feel like that mattered as I have grown professionally. But I will say every time I write that check or do that direct payment, I'm like, why did I wait so long?
I want to go last.
So I will say, my son is 16, and I swore that before he got to junior high, I would have it done. So I did, I had a plan, and I did accomplish that, and that was great. But I don't know that I would advise anyone to wait until they have a family to take that on, because it was tough. It was very difficult.
So let me say, I did not go to get my master's yet, and I'm not sure I'm going to. I am the only one up here that has not, and it's for a number of different reasons. Number one, money. Student loans are kicking my behind, and we'll continue to do that. As I said, I was in some schooling before the Mount Vernon experience, and I have a set of loans from then, and I had partial scholarship at that time also. I was a basketball player at Ohio Dominican. But those schools and those loans and interests keep adding up. So, and then the long hiatus between when I went to that school and this school, I just wanted to get done. I just wanted to get a degree and be done. And then on the flip side of that, as being a male in the field, I always found jobs in social work. Knock on wood, I have not had much difficulty finding a job in social work. Now, they've been entry level most times, but now I'm in a position with the LSW, I'm in a position to do some different things, and it's not entry level. And if I can't do those jobs that I want to do, I start my own company. We open up Ohio Gap Closures where we're providing the services that we see a need for. We're closing the gaps, as we say, for the areas that we need. So there's different avenues or different ways you can go. It is very helpful to have these masters, and it will help you open doors and get your foot in a lot of places. But I got also 25 years of experience that opens doors. I got experience in different fields and references. I know her from Rosemont. If I go into her company, I hope I didn't burn that bridge at that time. So I'm able to use those connections. We'll talk later. So
He's got 5 jobs.
I never say no to any job. But anyway, so I'm just saying there's other ways, but I would suggest you can get a master's. I would suggest to go do that right away because it's hard to go back down the line. As you see, it took me 20 years to go back. But if you don't, there are other opportunities and other ways you can do it.
Do you feel your classes prepared you well for the licensure exam?
Can I go first? Being that I'm the most recent, your classes are going to prepare you very well for the exam. Don't sweat that test. Everybody in my program was stressing out over it. And racking their brains buying all these steady exams and pre-tests and things they were paying hundreds of dollars for. I got notified, I had a friend of mine who was supposed to be here sometime. She said, hey Travis, there's a wait to take the test, but I found out there's an opening on Monday. If you call now and register, you can get in. I called, I studied one day, I passed. Now, like I said, I do have experience in the field, but I felt like the classes had got me ready. I felt like I learned a lot in the classes I've taken. I had great professors. You have great professors here that's going to teach you the things you need to know. They're going to give you, one of our professors was giving us practice questions in class, so why would I go pay for them and she's giving me the practice.
Who the heck was that? Because I didn't get that.
Professor told her what we needed. So I would just say, listen in class and use your peers. people that took the test before you in the classes, they're all going to help you prepare. So don't stress out over the LSW. I don't know about the NASP plan, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, I never had any issue with the licensure exam. I think the classes definitely prepared me well. I know some students did kind of like there was extra classes you could pay for and extra things, but I feel like everything from Mount Vernon, all my professors prepared us well. I know we did sometimes practice tests in class. I knew some students who took the exam before they graduated and they ended up passing with no issues. So I had no issue with being able to do that. For me, I did get like practice tests online. I got books from the library and kind of just got a whole bunch of study materials, kind of to review everything. But I would say not to overstress or kind of overthink it, because I think everything that you're learning now and you're doing is preparing you for that point. I know it's easy to kind of overstress and to think about, well, what does it look like? What is that test going to be like? But I think everything you're doing right now is preparing you for that point. And so I don't think you don't necessarily have to go out of your way to spend a whole bunch of money to prepare yourself for it, because I think you're probably more prepared than you think you might be. So.
Did you take the master's level test?
I took the bachelor's, so
Okay.
for me, I was in my master's program. I think with the cutoff, I was in the fall semester of my master's program and took the bachelor's
Okay.
level.
So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So in Indiana, you do not have to take a bachelor's level exam. So I left Mount Vernon, went to Indiana, did not have to have a bachelor's level exam. So I was a BSW in Indiana. So I didn't have to stress about tests, which was lovely. Went to California, got my master's, and came back to Ohio. And I took that. It made me an LSW, retroactively made me an LSW, but it was the licensure for the master's level exam. It was the master's level exam and gaining the clinical hours to be an LCSW. So I guess I can't really speak to Mount Vernon classes in the sense of the bachelor's level exam. I do not feel like overall, like my master's level classes prepared me for my master's level exam. I did buy a study test, and I made these nice little color-coded charts of here's Freud, right? Here's this, here's motivational interviewing, here's the theories, here's cognitive behavioral, all this. None of them were on the test, okay? They do not say, tell me what CBT is, right? It's Mary has these symptoms, and on 3 days a week she does this, and what is Mary's whatever, you know what I mean? So it's not, so I cannot speak to the bachelor's level exam, but I would personally recommend getting a study guide, definitely for at least the master's level exam, but don't do all the color-coded charts like I did, because it's a waste of time. I also did not tell anybody, except for my husband, when I was getting ready to take the test, because I didn't want that pressure, right, of everybody saying, did you pass, did you pass, did you pass? I recommend that. Then I got to celebrate on Facebook, right, and tell everybody, I passed. And then everybody's like, I didn't even know you take it. And by the way, they tell you in like this big of font, like, congratulations, you passed. I want like balloons. Okay? I studied hard. I studied for hours and days and days and days. So the master's level exam is completely different than it sounds like the bachelor's level exam.
Let me add one more thing. I like she said that the test is all critical thinking. It's not, you got to know a bunch of theories and all these practices. If you know how to rationalize some answers, there's one that not even related to the question. There's two that's very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, use your critical thinking skills and you'll be able to figure it out.
Well, and one thing they did tell me in my master's class in my master's school was, just go with the information you have on the test, right? Don't think about, well, what's Mary's background, right? What's happening to Mary in the scenario, not what happened the day before. And also, to be fair to California, they actually get all their hours first. So every state's different. So California, after you graduate with your master's, if you stay in California, you get all of your hours first, your clinical hours, and then you take a test. So I can't imagine that. I'm glad that you take the test first. Just a little FYI, if you feel like moving to California.
How relevant are the theories you learned in the social work curriculum? Do you use them in practice? And if so, how often?
I go, it doesn't
Go
matter.
ahead.
Again, I don't want to be the rebel up here, but those theories, I mean, they're good to know. They're good base of knowledge. What's more important is the core values you learn in social work. Those 6 core values that they teach you, that they pound in your head, those are things you use as references every day. You know, the dignity of a person, so forth, all those things. Those are the things that I use in my practice and in my experience. The PSA and the Ericksons and those things, very rarely do
Killing me, Josh.
I'm trying to give you the honest truth of what I'm doing here. So,
Integrity.
yes. I got
You got some
friends in
thumbs up in the
Texas,
back.
right. See that core value coming out right there?
You're in my theory class.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Those core values are very important. So, yes, learn the theories. They're good knowledge to have when you have to dig deep on some research on a client. But dealing with those psychosocial needs that I do every day, the quick things, the quick fixes, I hit core value type of things.
Yeah, I mean, I was a therapist before I switched my career, so, I agree. I mean, I was a therapist and the theories weren't really necessarily something that I went back to all the time. Now, are there other things that I use more often than not? Yes, strengths-based approach, okay, that's one that I used a lot. Okay, motivational interviewing.
Stages of development.
Yes, there are things that are very important, but, I always joke, like, I wonder what people would think if they observed my therapy sessions with my clients. But hey, they are great, doing great.
I would say with
Come on, Zach.
I guess it depends what field you're working in. I think with some of the theories, I think they all provide a good knowledge base. I don't think no matter what social work job you're in, you're not necessarily going to, when you're meeting with a client, pull out what a specific theory or think through, what am I going to use with this client? I think once you start learning a lot of the theories, they become almost kind of first-hand nature to you. A lot of times, we, of course, cognitive behavioral therapy, stages of change, motivational interviewing, all those things have been at least pretty relevant in my experience. Knowing what stage of change someone is in, whether someone's ready to make changes or if they feel like they're not even approaching that point of being able to make a change. So I think those are definitely important. I think the rest of everything is definitely important. I think it's good to know. You're not necessarily going to pull it out every single time you're in a session or when you're in a family session. So definitely, definitely don't pass off on those things, I would say. But again, I think it serves as kind of a good foundation for what other things you're going to be using in your social work field. If you're doing, even in therapy, a lot of times the most important thing is the rapport and the connection you're making with the client. So I think it's good to know what your personal style is and what techniques are kind of your go-tos. But it's not something you have to try and memorize every single thing or over-emphasize on or try and overthink it.
Well, I like what you said about it's not something you go and say, all right, I'm getting ready to use cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not like that. And clearly, if you have a personality disorder client, some things are going to work on them that aren't going to work. You know what I mean? There's some things just that aren't going to work with them. And some ways to approach them. So I think a lot of it probably is true that if you're using it, you don't really realize you're using it because it's just so ingrained in you. So that I'm with you right now.
Good save. Good save.
Sorry.
Lori,
Yeah, I wasn't in those classes.
all right. What ways have you been challenged in the field, and how have you overcome those challenges?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
Since I
She hasn't answered like last
Since I haven't had to
five.
answer the last couple. I think that one of the beautiful things about the field is there is no 2 days in a row that are the same. So challenge is something like you wake up in the morning and by 3 o'clock I'm like, I would have never guessed I would be doing this by 3 o'clock, like whatever this is. And it, you know, in our field especially, because we have an emergency shelter, ours can be anything from 0 people in shelter to this summer we had 6 kids and 3 adults in shelter within 24 hours. And when that happens, like our world gets turned upside down. It's a huge shift in life. We actually have some staff that have offices in shelter, so that it's even more of a change for them. But I think over the course of 20 years, you have a lot of things that change and that develop. Moving, we get really comfortable. After 15 years working in one agency, I got really comfortable in my ability to make decisions, really comfortable in the people that I worked with, what I knew about people in poverty, what I knew about, you know, just all of the different pieces of that life. And to make a career shift after 15 years, that was not an easy change because you all of a sudden are questioning everything. You also see how even though it is a social service field, social work folks are in the field, the field of domestic violence is actually really behind the field of early childhood. So I'm like, oh, come on, man, like we gotta catch up here. So there are parts of the field that are a little bit further behind in research and what they know and how they're implementing it. And so having the experience of both is really, it's interesting to me as like a studying in human behavior, because I'm going, wait a second, I kind of wish I would have known that. Like, because I feel like I'm bringing our staff, we're light years ahead now of where we were 4 years ago. We're probably 8 to 10 years ahead of where a lot of other organizations are, because I get it and we're moving in that direction, but I didn't realize that was like a real thing in the field, that some areas of the field are further ahead than others. So that was a huge shift for me.
I would say, kind of to piggyback on what she's saying, the challenges for me is to being a continual learner. The changes in, especially the insurance field, how the leadership in the country and in your government affects what I do day to day. The billing and who can bill for what has changed multiple times. If you're licensed, you can bill a certain amount of hours. If you're non-licensed, you can't bill this type of group or that type of group. So those things affect what I do daily. So the documentation is a big challenge for me to stay on top of. How many hours we can bill, how to write that note, and get the correct amount of money for the company who's on your back to make X amount of dollars every day or every week. So that challenge is continual, and it won't change, it won't stop, because your government's going to keep changing. What amount of money they set for Medicaid dollars changes all the time. So those things is a huge challenge.
That's the biggest challenge, at least for me in my current position. We're being a mental health hospital. We have a lot of different people who aren't just social workers in the hospital. So we're working with nurses, and we're working with psychiatrists, and also like therapists. So whenever you're in a team, everyone kind of comes with different ideas and different thoughts. So my idea of what is going to be good for a patient, or what I think is appropriate for a patient, psychiatrists or nursing may have a different approach or a different way of looking at it. So kind of coming from different perspectives, sometimes there could be disagreements and challenges with if we're discharging our patient, or a different approach with whether it's a medication or working with a family with a patient. So I think the biggest thing is how to collaborate with people on multiple disciplines, and how to kind of still meet the needs of the patients while everyone's still kind of being on the same page. I think the bigger challenge probably beyond that, at least from my experience, is working then also a lot of the management and the administration. Sometimes there can be conflicts between what you're doing as a social worker. You know, you're there for the patient, you're providing patient-centered care. But sometimes management or administration, there could be some conflicts as far as as the kind of the business side of things, as far as I think is appropriate for a patient discharge. Sometimes someone can kind of come in and try and disrupt that. So I think I've grown in knowing how to set those boundaries and kind of being confident in my decision making and what I think is appropriate. So I think it's appropriate for a patient to leave the hospital on this certain day while they may try and push the discharge back. I'm going to be confident in expressing that and knowing what I bring to the table as a social worker is just important as anyone else on that team, and making sure to stand up for that. And regardless of what the outcome's going to be, knowing that I stood up for the patient, was working with the family, and that I think sometimes the biggest thing is being able to bring that to the table, knowing you're doing what's right, even if it's not always going to go the exact way you think, making sure you're always bringing that to the table.
A couple of things when you talked about working with other people that from other disciplines. One of the things immediately that stuck out to me was, since you guys will be graduating with a bachelor's, one of the things that I ran into that was a challenge right away early in my career was, as the case manager, boots on the ground every single day with the client, we would go in and see a psychiatrist for 15 minutes every 3 months, have a meeting with the two of them, and have maybe like a big treatment team meeting twice a month with everybody, therapist, case manager, psychiatrist, and talk for 5 minutes on each client. I was the least heard of anybody there, right? The psychiatrist gets to dictate the treatment style. The therapist gets to dictate the treatment typically. So I think as an early bachelor's level social worker, don't be afraid to stand up for what you see. If you see a client oncoming crisis, if you see a trauma that's coming or a trigger that's coming for that client, don't be afraid to stand up. Now I'm not saying like get into a fight over it, but you know, early in my career, I was intimidated by the therapist. I was intimidated by the psychiatrist, even though I would go home and feel like I know these clients better than them, right? I'm with them sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes every day for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, right? So don't be afraid to advocate for your clients. That was a challenge early in my career. I know that we'll talk about this in a couple questions, but I have had a huge obstacle with burnout. It's been a battle in my whole entire career up until the last probably 4 years. I've really struggled with burnout, and we'll talk about that. And then right now in my current job, I work, I talked about that I educate the community, but I also work with like family children first councils and job family services, and to collaborate on a lot of teams. It's more community-based advocacy. And so I struggle with like my office and the local community because it's all very rural farmers. And there's while we have this big push for mental health awareness, and suicide is the #1 cause of death in farmers in the United States, it's not talked about. They don't want to hear about it. They don't care. Carroll County used to be the #1, that's where I work, Carroll County used to be the #1 dairy producing county in Ohio, and it is now declining rapidly. People are losing their dairy farms left and right, and people are just, it's horrible, it's horrific what's happening. And so me trying to step in as a professional of not only a person who's never grown up on a farm, who doesn't know the difference between 2 different kind of milking cows, right, to try to come into these people and say, let's talk about mental health, right? You know, I'm worried about you, I'm concerned about you. It's a big obstacle that I've had to overcome, and I've been in the county for 5 years now. So while it's an encouragement because I've been there, I've built a lot of good relationships, it takes time, it can be hard, and even after all this time, they still don't really like to talk about it. You know, I just got certified in mental health first aid. If you're not familiar with what that is, I can tell you about it later. And everybody's like, yeah, I'm so excited, I want you to have it, you know, bring it, when are you coming and teaching it? And I was like, okay, now. And I had spots for 30 and I had 10 come, you know, out of all these people who were so excited, begging me to teach it. So, you know, that's definitely a challenge that I've had, but, you know, you gotta keep advocating.
How did you end up where you are? Did you end up in a different area than what you expected? Briefly describe an average workday.
I think for myself, I kept my options kind of open, so I wasn't always set on exactly what I wanted to do after I got my bachelor's or even after I got my master's. I was thinking a lot of maybe individual counseling, maybe working like in a medical setting. So I was definitely kind of up in the air as far as specifics. So with my opportunity being in the mental health hospital, doing a lot of crisis intervention, I don't think that would have been the first choice that I would have saw myself being in. Doing a lot of kind of short-term, a lot of group-based therapy, it's not something I necessarily would have been my first choice. Now, being where I'm at now, I think it's a really good foundation. Specifically, probably definitely, that was the position that I've definitely grown the most in since being in my social work career. And it's definitely not something I would have envisioned, like that's exactly where I'm going to end up. It's kind of like a typical work day. Usually coming into the hospital, we start out with a treatment team every day in the morning. So that's the kind of team meetings Bridget kind of talked about a little bit, but for our treatment team, it will be usually meeting with the nurses, the psychiatrists who are managing the medications, the social workers, kind of reviewing each patient who's in the hospital as far as if there's any issues going on, what's the projected discharge for when they leave the hospital, is there any kind of major crises or concerns. We usually meet with all new patients that come in after we've kind of individually met with them, just as kind of like a meet and greet and seeing what questions they have. Throughout the day, it looks a little bit different every day because a lot of times we will range from leading psychotherapy groups, so a lot of those groups will be focused on, sometimes might be doing cognitive behavioral therapy, kind of reframing the way we're thinking, negative thinking, or behaviors that we're gaining control of or are trying to coping with, talking about when triggers kind of brought us to a crisis to be in the hospital. And then we're also doing like individual assessments throughout the day, like psychosocial assessments. So that's where we're kind of developing the treatment plan with each patient, kind of seeing or brought them into the hospital, where their kind of level of supports are, have they been in the hospital before, and see kind of where we're going to meet the patient at, what's their level of need look like. There's kind of a typical kind of flow what the day looks like, but it depends on the day, because sometimes we'll come in and we'll get like 10 assessments for one day and have like 3 therapists. So sometimes we have to kind of just like divide up the assessments and divide up the different groups. Sometimes we'll have a patient, you can't really predict crises happening, so you'll have a patient sometimes who's arguing with staff or might become violent or throwing chairs around. So you have to kind of be flexible as far as, you can have a work day and a structure, but sometimes, there's going to be crises that happen. So for us, families may come in unannounced and expect to demand to speak with a psychiatrist or a therapist. And sometimes I'll have to kind of go meet with the patient or meet with the family to kind of de-escalate whatever issue is going on. So it's for my job specifically, there's kind of some structure, kind of the main things that we're doing in the day, but you never know when something kind of comes up, something unexpected. So I think for my job, I think it's really helped in my flexibility, being able to, if something comes up, I'm going to be there for the patient regardless, or if there's going to be an issue, I'm going to make sure to address that, even if there's all these kind of other tasks going on. That's helped with being able to kind of how you're going to manage your crises, what's going to help and de-escalate the situation and not elevate the person or whatever problem is going on. So it's kind of a typical work day. It's definitely been a really great position. I've gained a lot of knowledge of working with a team of other disciplines, community resources, and also doing a lot of therapy as well, interventions. So there's a lot of different things with my job in particular, but that's kind of a synopsis of it. So.
Can you repeat the question?
No, not that. How did you end up where
Sorry.
you are? Did
No.
you end up
Bridget, pay attention, sorry.
How did you end up where you are? Did you end up in a different area than you expected? And then briefly describe an average working day.
All right, I'm ready. Okay, so I did not end up where I thought I would end up. So let me first ask, do they still have a family consumer science program here?
No.
Okay, good. Oh, I mean, sorry. Okay, so this is really funny, and I swear I don't mean anything mean by it. Okay, when I was in school at Mount Vernon, there was like a thing, and we all used to make fun of the people that went in family consumer science. Okay, it just, all right, it's not a big deal. Okay, and so the very fact that my new job title is family consumer science educator, my husband reminds me every single day. Remember when you made fun of those people that majored in family consumer science? And I'm like, no, I don't remember that. So, okay, so that's just a funny caveat. So, when I graduated and I said that I wanted to get my master's because I didn't want to be kind of like the low level of total pole for the rest of my life. I don't know if it was like I was confused about what I wanted to do, or like maybe, like, don't take this the wrong way, like I didn't have guidance of what I wanted to do. I mean, obviously I was school, so you know what I mean, I didn't have, you weren't in charge of me, but you know what I mean? Right. I don't know, and so I interviewed at 2 schools for a master's, and I just kind of like felt pushed to be clinical, right? So I felt like, oh, you go get your master's and then you become a therapist, because that's what everybody does, right? I mean, even though I knew that there were people out there that didn't do that, but I just felt like those people had started out as a therapist, and so that's what I was supposed to do. So that's what I did. I went to school and I got my clinical degree, and I came back and had some things and had some health issues, and I got a job as a therapist, as a licensed clinical therapist. I don't have my LCSW, but I was on track to get that. And I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want the pressure. I couldn't handle the pressure of just the billing of the Medicaid, of the, of my supervisor. I had just, no. So I just wasn't cut out to be a clinical social worker. So then I was like, what am I gonna do, like, with my life? Because I didn't know, I would come home from work every night, and I ran the whole entire foster care department at our agency, so I mean, I was in charge of everything, and I just wasn't cut out for that. I mean, I love foster care and adoption, that's a passion of mine, but I needed support and I didn't have it. And I was working like 70 hours a week and on call 24/7 and didn't have any support, even from my supervisor. So I just got burnt out very quickly, and I already was not happy being a clinical social worker, seeing patients on outside outside therapy, as well as running the foster care department. So I'd come home crying every night, and my husband was like, we need to find something else. So I actually took a pay cut and went and did a job with Ohio State Extension called SNAP Ed. Are you familiar with that? So it's nutrition education for low-income families and children. So you're still kind of using, your social work background a little bit. I mean, just in a more creative way, right? So I just had to be more creative about it, and they didn't really want to hire me because they're like, you have your master's degree, and I'm like, it's okay, just hire me anyway. And, I didn't have a dietetics background, and I don't eat the healthiest, but they hired me, and so I kind of, was there, and they had a family consumer science educator, and there are some very traditional family consumer science educators in my field. There are some that have been there for 30 years, and then they teach canning, sewing, cooking, food safety, those kind of things. So there's the very traditional programming. But I saw, as she was getting ready to retire, that there's just this new influx of educators who are coming in with backgrounds in social work and mental health and community-based kind of therapies, things like that. And they're coming in and they're making a global change or a policy system environmental change through this new FCS educator role, right? So not only am I teaching the individuals, but we're doing things at the state level. I'm doing national trainings, I'm doing national presentations now. And when she retired, I applied for that job and I got it. And never would I have thought I didn't even know what extension was. I didn't even know what 4-H was. I didn't know anything. And so when I got this job, it just opened up a new freedom for me to be much more of a probably what I should have went into the more global track of master's level social work that I didn't go into before. So now I have that opportunity to still use my clinical social work degree that I studied for, but also do more community-based social work and advocacy and working with agencies like the domestic violence shelter in our community and counseling centers in our community, which are very limited because I'm in a very small county. And like I said, starting to do that. So yeah, no, I never in a million years thought that definitely my title would be this. Yeah.
Is clinical degree and master's degree the same thing?
It's a clinical track, yeah. So I have a master's degree clinical track, meaning like therapy track, and then I don't know, what do they call the other track? Yeah, like community-based, global, different kinds of things. It's more like how to work globally. Grant writing, that kind of macro, that's the word I'm looking for, thank you. Macro, yeah. So that's what I should have done, and I did clinical instead. Yeah. So no, I never would have thought I would be where I am today, but I very much use my social work degree every single day. And my typical work day, like I said, is very different because I teach so many different kinds of things. There is no typical work day. Monday morning I'm getting up and I'm teaching food safety class, which I hate, but it's a big money maker, and sometimes you gotta pay the bills, right? So doing that, but then I teach, like, you know, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays I go into school and I get to hang out with the elementary school kids and we talk about prescription drug safety. You know, on Mondays sometimes I get to go and do the matter balance with the senior citizens. It's just so, like, they're like scheduled classes, right? So I schedule out like months in advance. You know, and teach about, and I get to do crafts with the senior citizens, which is fun. And, you know, I get to go into the daycares, I get to go into Head Start and teach gardening classes, and we have a little community garden, you know, and I have colleagues that do, like, way more epically awesome things than I do, like Whitney, who's a graduate from here. She's like changing the world in Marion County, and I'm like, Whitney, I want to be you when I grow up, okay? And she's just so awesome. So yeah, there's no typical work day. You know, I go to trainings, I go to conferences. I just did trauma-informed care training this week. I actually am in the National Association for FCS people. And so I go and present at conferences there, but present about mental health things. So yeah, there is no typical work day. It's super fun. And I get to do what I want. But I still make sure that I stay within approximately 40 hours because my job is salaried. And there's a lot of FCS educators who work way more than 40 hours. And I learned very harshly in my job that I left that I was going to do the best that I could to stay within 40 hours. That is... I will preach that till the end. Stay in the 40 hours. You can do it, and you can say no. He doesn't say no, I don't think.
40 hours.
Where would you like
Still about where I thought I would be? No, I'm a criminal justice major. And on a panel on a Friday afternoon. But I will say, you know, it's interesting just how kind of, I don't know, life happens. I have the same things that I do every day that I feel like also keeps me grounded. So every morning when I leave, my prayer is, whatever I get thrown at me today, I can handle it. Like, so I literally, that's like my self-talk in the morning. Because it can be, I mean, this week alone, I've had 120 teachers today. We had the Attorney General's office I had spent 2 hours with them one day this week. I've had a grievance filed against me with a board of 12. I have 12 board members that are like, it's like having 12 bosses. So to think that, like, now I'm an executive director managing a budget, social work, just this feel, like, in general, we're right-brain people. Math is not like our jam. So managing $1 million budget for my agency, that's a stretch for me. So definitely not where I thought I would be in terms of doing that kind of thing, but I'm kind of getting into it a little bit. Like, it's almost scary that I enjoy the budget side of it and grant writing, and I'm like, wait, if I ask for more money here, we could take this and use this for this, and I'm like figuring all these like puzzle pieces out. So that part is very different than what I ever thought I would experience, but I mean, days are never the same. I do a lot of meetings, which is kind of annoying, and a lot of like, because it's a small community and I'm from here and I've worked here for 20 years, I don't go anywhere that I don't know someone. So it's also annoying to like schedule lunch with Travis and have 3 people stop at our table. I haven't really scheduled lunch with Travis, but like, have 3 people, we might, have 3 people stop at your table, like ask questions about work. So that's like one thing, just that, I mean, when I'm with my family, we go to Columbus. We don't come here because, you know, you learn like some just tricks of the trade, I guess, where you do things that are just different that you didn't 25 years ago. I would have never thought, oh, don't go to Walmart in Mount Vernon on the weekend because you're going to run into clients, you're going to run into staff, and you're going to see all these people that you've spent time with during the week. So go the other direction. Like, those are things that I just didn't think about, I guess. So. How about you, Travis?
So, you know, I'll wake up, have a bowl of Captain Crunch, and, kind of like everybody said, there's no typical day. In all the jobs I worked, they're crazy stories. We had a lot of crazy stories in Rosemont. I had crazy stories from going as a case manager into people's homes. I mean, anything from being attacked by animals and to nudity to I mean, you run the gamut in a day. You don't know what you're going to see. You just have to be prepared and just be confident in what you're doing. Is this where I thought I'll be? Kind of. I think all my jobs and all my placements have kind of been ordained by God in my eyes. I've been placed in those situations, and that'll go into another question of, you know, will I tell you anything different? I think social work's a field you got to be called into, kind of. It's a calling instead of a job, because if you just look at it as a job, you're not going to last very long. The burnout is very high, the stress is high, and you got to be in it to win it. This has got to be what you're made for. I think I'm where I'm supposed to be. I think I'm supposed to go higher. I'm supposed to do some things that's going to be upcoming, which I'm trying to work towards. But I'll just leave it at that. That the days are different. I could tell you some crazy stories. See me afterwards. But I'll keep it clean and like that right now. So there we go.
Once the mic is on.
There we go. Right.
What are your go-to self-care practices in order to prevent burnout?
I have a punching bag in my basement. That's real. I mean, I do. And like, I did go for it, but it's because there are days that honestly, there's nothing that yoga, I don't do that, but breathing or shopping or eating, there are days that none of those things can take away like just getting out physical aggression. And it took a long time. It's been down there for 2 years, and I will tell you, it's been like, and my family knows, like, I have earbuds, I don't even turn the music on loud, I just go down there and punch the bag a little bit. But that is an important part. I also like do other exercise things in the mornings. I have much better days in the mornings that I have gym time set up. But I mean, honestly, some of it is kind of to what you were saying. This is, like, I find joy in my work. So it feels like, because this is part of who I am, I don't, like, the self-care, the burnout, I mean, I might work 60 hours a week, but it's because it's part of who I am and that joy that it brings me, and watching people grow and learn, whether it's clients or staff or whatever, like that kind of fuels me at the same time. So I'm not a normal one in the field, I will say that, but it is a balance, and I think I've just found my balance. We're a big basketball family, and we travel a lot, do travel basketball, so that's also like an outlet, but that's probably my most go-to. And I have like 3 shows that I won't miss, or I DVR, and that you know, I can get lost in that for an hour.
Yeah, mindless TV is great.
This is I'm gonna say it. So this is A Million Little Things, and then I got 4. Greenleaf and I can't think of the last one. I'll think of that.
just to chime in, first of all, she does have an all-star basketball player in her family. It's really good. But this is kind of one of my areas I like to talk about a lot. I train on this topic of self-care and burnout, but I'll make it real quick. I look at this in 3 different avenues. Before work or before crisis, before doing anything, during work or during a crisis, and then afterwards. So before, you have to do all those self-care things like sleeping, eating right, working out, all the things you can do to prepare yourself for your work day, to prepare yourself to be successful and do your best job. In that moment, in that work, in that crisis, in that time, you have to do the things like she said, the breathing. You have to have some coworkers that you're able to debrief with and talk to and process a situation with, and be able to professionally bounce some ideas off of to work with. And then afterwards, I get away from all social work people and have people I don't talk to my job about. A whole separate different group of friends where you can talk about the fight in the Browns game last night and not talk about what happened at work.
We can talk about that.
So yeah, I look at it in those 3 areas, and that's a really quick way to put it. See me later if you want more training. But that's what I would say. Just try to do those things before, during, and after, and you can be successful. But burnout is real, and try to prepare yourself as best you can.
I'd say for me, a lot of it's just hanging around my own social support. So I have a lot of close group of friends, different groups of friends outside of college, and those who I met at college. So I try to definitely stay up to date with my close supports. I definitely try and be really intentional about keeping like those strong friendships, even friendships I made here in school, because I think that's definitely really important. Not falling back on that. So whether it's traveling, doing road trips, or I go to a lot of concerts usually, and I try and make sure that I'm doing a lot of fun, active things, things that I just really enjoy doing, even if it's really small things. Also having really good spiritual supports, whether it's like church, or there's spiritual supports that you're surrounded by. Making sure that I think going off what Travis said, making sure you have people you can talk to, not just about like your job. I think that has its place and that's important, but also just talking about like what I'm interested in, or things, hobbies that I have. Maybe if I really need to process something through something, making sure I have supports that I can do that with. A lot of times just hanging out with friends, and I know I've done a lot of holiday things, so Halloween party stuff. I have Friendsgivings that are planned that I'm looking forward to. So just making sure I think I'm staying connected with my social supports. Not only receiving support from them, but also giving that support too. I'd say those are some of my biggest things.
Yeah, probably pretty much what everybody has said. I mean, I don't have a punching bag, but I typically do like to exercise, but I have a son who has special needs right now, so I don't get a lot of exercising like I was exercising. And I noticed that I missed that. I like to read. I will say your advice about before, during, and after is great. I think that if you can help that at all, do that. Sometimes you do get stuck in a situation like I got into where it was just extreme. I mean, the situation it was a crisis 24 hours a day. And I don't necessarily promote job hopping all the time, but sometimes it means removing yourself from a job, and you'll hear people say grass isn't always greener on the other side. But when there's no grass on the side that you're on, right? Okay, if it's brown on the other side, then it's better. So, I don't necessarily advocate for you to always constantly quit your job. But if it is just like a really crisis situation, it is for real. But yeah, I think that doing all you can to prevent those situations from coming up is really great. Yeah, and everything that they said was really great.
All right. What is some advice that you would give someone going into the field of social work?
I would say just always keeping your options open. I think a lot of social work, at least when I was a student and we had this panel, I think a lot of social workers had said, keep your options open, because you never know what's going to happen, and you may be surprised at where your skill set is and what your knowledge base is. So, I mean, whether that's macro work, whether that's individual therapy, maybe it is crisis work, you never know, you might get into something that you're really passionate about, or something you felt like you couldn't do, and then you might surprise yourself and feel like, I'm really growing in this, and this is something that I really love to do. So I'd say definitely keeping options open, keeping an open mind. I wouldn't say you have to know 100% what you're wanting to do, because I don't think I knew 100%. You know, I wasn't necessarily thinking crisis work, but that's an opportunity that came up, and I definitely don't regret taking that opportunity. And then I know I had also one other thing I wanted to say. Yeah, keeping options open. Yeah. Oh yeah. When it comes to mine, I'll come back to it. I have one other thing, but I wanted to mention too. But yeah.
I would say that probably, honestly, social work is probably one of the most diverse fields out there. You could do a lot of things with a social work degree, and I think that if you're interested in any kind of social services or, you know, just like macro practice work, I mean, I think that the social work degree is the place to go. You have a lot more options than even some of my friends that I've seen that have psychology degrees or you know, other kind of human development kind of degrees. I think social work is definitely the most diverse. Since I took my career change and no longer practice social work, I still keep up my licensure because you never know what might happen. So I still pay my dues that they take from me. And I'm still very close to an LCSW if I decide to finish that. And I also am a home study certified to do home studies for adoptive parents and foster parents. And so I keep that up because I could do contract work if I ever wanted to do that. So there's just so many things you don't even think of that you could do with social work. Yeah, I appreciate your passion. Your passion to go beyond the 40 hours. It is a passion. No, I mean, and because now I feel like a harsh, horrible person, right? Because I'm saying, you know, because I'm saying like stay at 40 hours, but like, you know, I've had a very traumatic year. Okay, I have a very ill son, yada yada yada. And if it's taught me anything, it's just the 40 hours you can and if people want to do it, that's great, right? But don't let people tell you you have to do it, because you don't have to do it. You don't. And that's why I left a field that told me I had to do 70 hours. And I said no. And I told Josh I was going to come and do this piano, and everybody's going to be like, you know, I'm never allowed here again. But, you know, but even in the field I'm in now, I mean, people do 60, 70 hours a week, and you know, sure, do I do one night program occasionally, or, you know, like a early Monday morning, I'm doing my program at 7 o'clock in the morning. But I try to flex that hour because I have that ability, right? Now, we all know if you're a therapist, Medicaid requires 72 hours, you have to bill by. Okay, so that's a little bit different story. But you can do it at 40 hours. You have to be intentional, and I'm telling you, it's probably the best way that you can prevent burnout is to just stay within the 40 hours and do other things that you love to do that we talked about. And you can do the side things. I mean, there's things that I volunteer at that are not part, you know, I volunteer at my church as a mentor, right? And I'm using my social work degree, but it's a volunteer kind of thing, right? I volunteer at our YMCA. So you're still doing things that you're passionate about, but you're just doing them outside of your 40-hour work day. So I just encourage you to get away from your 40 hours when you can, and it can be done. And if people are bullying you and telling you that you can't, you can. And you come talk to me, and I'll talk to them.
I would say relationships, like build and maintain relationships. Find, and this is in any field, but find someone who's your mentor. I mean, I worked for someone who for 15 years was my direct supervisor, and I 100% know that I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now had I not had her as a mentor for all the years that we worked together. It made it harder to leave, but it's also really cool because now we can like have a totally different relationship as two executive directors. So that's one thing. But I do think that you just never know when your paths are going to cross. So it's kind of like being open to it, but also like being a kind human. Like just be a nice person to everyone. Don't burn those bridges when you leave. All that kind of thing. I'm not taking your answer because that is. You just never know when the next door is going to open and what that's going to look like for you, and you're going to want to go through it, but you don't want to like have to explain your way through it. And if you've done like not cool stuff, you may have to explain yourself a little bit too.
100% correct. Don't burn bridges. You never know. The social work community is very small. Whether it's Franklin County or Knox County, where we're at, it's very small. You're going to run into people again. So I'll give a little different answer. I was going to say that, but be okay with delayed gratification.
Yeah.
You're not always going to get that pat on the back or thanks for helping me, because we're dealing with a sick population. I mean, you're dealing with clients that need help, that's traumatized, that's hurt. So be okay with delayed gratification or no gratification. You may never get it, so be okay with that. Know that you're doing the right thing, doing it for the right reason, but be okay with not getting that pat on the back all the time.
I thought my one thing real quick. This could go mainly maybe for like those who are in practicum right now, but it could go for those who are just in their, if they're just starting their social work classes. Don't hesitate or feel afraid to like take initiative if there's something that you're wanting to learn or seek more knowledge about. Especially like in your internships, if you're really wanting an experience where you're having really enriching, clinical experiences, whether it's like leading groups or individual, or if it's there's groups that you want to lead, or if there's things you want to learn as far as a macro setting, making sure, talking with your professors and your supervisors about what those opportunities look like. Because I think you definitely have a really foundational kind of experience, and really getting that experience now and having that prepare you for your internships. Even if it's just, like it's an internship, but I think there can be a lot of things now that you take with you, and that you'll continue to build upon and grow. So just asking about those opportunities, and seeing kind of what's out there, whether that's in the classroom or even in like your practicum settings.
Take a grant writing class. I missed that. I should have taken it.
Okay, at this point, I want to open it up to questions. So if you have questions for any of our panelists, yes?
I have two, just like a generally for all of you or for one, on what stage or whatever. So how do you keep your private life and work life separate, especially if you're on call?
I would say you have to be really good at setting boundaries, and as Bridget said, that it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to do, but being organized and setting boundaries, you're able to keep those things separate and separate your time and devote the right amount of time to different things. Work is hard to keep. Some jobs, not all jobs. Some jobs are easy to go 40 hours and cut it off. Some jobs are difficult when you're going on a Saturday to Walmart running into your clients. But always knowing that you're representing yourself and sometimes other people, I just keep that in mind always. But it's just about that boundary setting and limits and being organized, I would say.
I think the on-call, it's tough, because, I mean, the reality is the phone rings in the middle of the night, and I might not be the first one to hear it. My husband's like, get the phone. And I'm answering it, and I'm realizing, I can't have this conversation right here, so then I'm like hiding in the bathroom or going somewhere else, But it is, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes we're off, I've been in a hotel room and had my phone, ring in the middle of the night, and it's like, boy, I don't really have anywhere to go but the hallway. So like you just have to figure it out. But there are times, especially the on-call piece, that is difficult.
Your family has to work with you.
They do,
They know
yeah.
what you
Like,
do.
they know, yeah.
give you some space.
Yeah.
They
Right.
respect that you're doing a certain job. So typical violations don't happen or things like
They're
that.
not providing input.
Right.
Yeah.
I think why the on-call didn't work for me is because I couldn't separate at all. So I think being self-aware, and I just, I joke about leaving my job and, and how horrible it is, blah, blah, but like, I just wasn't cut out for the clinical, supervisory on-call 24 hours a day role. And I think, like you said, you are, like, you know, so it's, sometimes you need to take a step back, and sometimes that means you're in that role and then you realize after the fact, right? Or sometimes you can identify that before you go into that role. But just having self-awareness that it's okay to not be able to be that type of person.
Yeah, I'd say, like Bridget said, I think self-awareness is key. Like, for me, knowing, like, maybe when you're overthinking about maybe a client situation outside of work, I think for me, I'm able to kind of separate. Luckily I'm not on call. I might get calls sometimes from supervisors and coworkers, but I'm not mandatory to be on call. So I would say, like, a lot, just self-awareness, knowing, like, if you're overthinking about, like, you know, a difficult situation at work, or there's a certain patient that affected you, I think be able to take notice of that and kind of, you know, be able to work through that. And if there's something that you can't control at work, you know, it's outside of work, being able to kind of set it aside and know, like, or if there's a situation I can't really control, recognizing that and being able to kind of pick it up the next day, and knowing that obsessing over it outside of work there may be things out of your control that you can't really handle, or at least address, and being able to recognize that, do what you can to, you know, process that through, and then pick up whatever that is the next day.
And then my second one is, again, for just whoever wants to answer, do you get paid for the extra hours you work, or is it just kind of like the salary where this is how much you get no matter how much you work?
So when I used to, when I was a therapist, I would get paid on call. I would get paid for that time. But like, because I was the supervisor, like if you were the on-call person, you got paid on call. But there were times that I wasn't the on-call person, but I had to be on call for the on-call person, right? So I wasn't paid when I was the on-call person for the on-call person. But no, like in my current job, if I work over 40 hours, I don't get paid for the 40 hours.
It all depends what your job description is. If you're an hourly worker or a salary worker, a lot of jobs will have an additional bonus or stipend for the on-call person. A lot of the crisis centers have that. So it all depends what that job title is. But if your salary, you want to bank on working 45 hours a week instead of 35. That's kind of how our salary positions work. But an hourly position, they want you to cut it off at 40 because they don't want to pay you those extra dollars.
I guess it depends what agency, you know, what type of work you're working for, because I know sometimes for certain therapy, like practice, because sometimes if you pick up extra like clients on the caseload, some agencies may like give you bonuses, and I think it just depends kind of what setting you're going in, what the type of work is, yeah, kind of like Travis is saying, what the job description is. I know mine is just is salary, so even if I work over 40 hours, I won't get compensated for it. So it kind of depends on the field and, you know, what the agency is, the type of work you're going into.
Other questions?
I know there's more questions out there.
They
I
want
know,
to
right?
leave.
Right.
There's your opportunity.
Right.
I want to hear stories.
You want to hear stories?
Yeah, like horror stories.
Horror stories.
I got some already.
Well, maybe you can come up afterwards
Come see us
and hear
afterwards.
horror stories.
Definitely.
I'll tell you a couple.
Yeah, I got one.
Other questions? Okay. Well, why don't we then bring to a closure this part of the program, and if anyone wants to stay afterwards and ask our panelists questions, I'm sure they'll stay for a few more minutes, but if we could just take a second and thank them for their time.